want me to go up to the
You
podium?
can, wherever, if you want to stay there, you can stay there, that's fine.
Well, hi, my name is Hector Gavilla, and I happen to be a candidate for Suffolk County Legislature, but I was asked today to speak about the importance of the county executive race, and generally all of the county races are very important because we are facing a fiscal crisis in Suffolk County. And it was just reported in today's Newsday that Suffolk County is having major financial problems, despite what the current administration is telling people in their newsletters. Now, why is that important for you to go out there and vote and tell people to vote? Because this affects the county's ability to get credit if they have to get a loan. The bond ratings are very bad. It's junk bond status practically. That's equivalent to having a bad credit score on your credit report. So that means that if the county has to go out and borrow money, the interest rate is higher. And how are they going to pay back that interest rate? By creating additional taxes and additional fees. The county has really hurt people in recent years by implementing programs such as the red light camera program, which they just renewed for another 5 years. Okay, some of you know that. And there may be, out there a few supporters of the program that say, well, just drive carefully, but that's not what the case is. The case is that it generates $30 million in tax revenue, and they call it a fee, but to me, a three-letter word for tax is fee. Fee is just a three-letter word for that. And so what they're basically doing here is they're unfairly taxing us, and it generates a lot of money. But also, they're putting these cameras in areas like Babylon, Brookhaven, Islip, Huntington, but you don't see any in the Hamptons. You don't see any in South Hall. So we're unfairly, paying for that. So now, why does this come back to us today? Because we can make a difference by voting. So if that's an issue that concerns you, vote on November 5th and find out who are the candidates that support it or oppose it and what they could do about our budget. So instead of putting the burden on us, the taxpayers, maybe they could be more responsible and spend less money. The budget right now is over $3 billion with a B. And we have a deficit budget, which it depends who you talk to, but it's somewhere in the areas of $200 million a year. That means that we're spending over $200 million a year of money that we don't have. And once again, they try to get it from us in taxes and fees and other ways. And we're getting to a point where it's unsustainable. Now, I mentioned the red light camera program, that's just one. But also home ownership. If you own a home, most people have to get a mortgage, and you record that mortgage with the Suffolk County Clerk's office. Well, the fee for recording that mortgage used to be a flat fee of just $65, but now the minimum is $500 and up. So yeah, believe it or not, I see some of you grimacing in the audience, but it went, in a period of 2 years, it went from $65 to a minimum $500, and there was no justification for that. It's not like the county clerk's office said that our expenses suddenly went up, or we're providing better services, so we need to charge more, or they didn't say we're gonna hire more people. No, it's still the same service, but what it does now is it generates more revenue for them so that they can try to pay their bills. It hurts people that currently own a home as well, because if you want to refinance your mortgage to try to get a lower rate, you're looking at a fee of at least $1,000, where once again, that was only a $65 fee. And it doesn't matter if you have a $200,000 home or a $2 million home, you're still going to pay these fees. Now, the big question that people will ask us, when we're running, okay, Hector, you want to cut these fees, you want to cut all of these taxes, how are you going to replace it? And my answer to them is, stop spending. Let's cut the spending. And that's the right answer to give to people. And one last issue I want to bring up too is in the next election cycle, which I believe would be in 2021 election, the Suffolk County Legislature, the government actually, has passed public financing for their own campaigns. which means that in the next election cycle, 2 years from now, when a Suffolk County legislator or an executive runs, the government, your taxpayer dollars, will give each candidate $50,000 to pay for their campaign materials. Now, is anyone in favor of that?
No.
No. And they try to spin it by saying, well, you know, we don't want the candidates to have special interests, needs and all that, but they're really being very selfish, and that's additional revenue, you know, that can be used to help pay down their bills. But instead, here we have a revenue source from OTB, which is Jake's 58. Believe it or not, Suffolk County will share in some of that revenue. So instead, you would think that they would use that revenue to help pay their bills, but instead they're going to use that money to help pay for palm cards and lawn signs and TV commercials and things like that. And to me, that's an insult to the people. And these are issues that most people out there are not aware of. But you have to, you know, find out who is running, find out how they feel about. Those are just 3 issues I brought up, but about all the issues that concern all of you. And it really affects your pocketbook, it affects your wallet. And so this is why it's very important to vote in these local elections, because when it comes down to it, it affects your livelihood and your quality of life living here in Suffolk County. Thank you.
All right. So, Hector, you gotta go, right? Well,
I don't know, how is the format? Are they questions, answers, or?
Well, basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Maya do a presentation really quick, and I don't wanna, you know, again, I know you have to split
Yes,
to another
I do
thing.
have to go. So thank you.
Yeah, so absolutely, so we're good, so we're actually good on that.
And I apologize about having to leave, but.
Oh, no, no
thank you for
worries,
taking
no
the
worries, I
break.
appreciate you taking the time to come, so.
Nice meeting everybody, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So next, Maya, if you will, me and Maya had a conversation about doing this event, and one of the most important things that we can do is reach out to the public, is, you know, stream things like this live, and get the online audience, you know, involved, and get people locally involved. We have people in the chat room, in the live feed right now watching us. So with that said, everybody, Maya Jones, she's going to talk a little bit about her company, Shades of Long Island, and then we're going to get to the panel.
Well, thank you guys for coming out to our event. I'm really excited. And like Raheem said, we got together, we had a conversation, and started talking about politics and the lack of participation in politics. So we wanted to put this event together, and I wanted to start off by telling you guys a little bit about myself. So.
Oh my God, am I gonna wait?
So, as Raheem said, my name is Maya Jones, and I'm a journalist, I'm a writer. I've been a journalist for about 6 years now. I've been doing on-the-ground reporting on politics, entertainment, social justice, different things. And I'm also the founder and editor-in-chief of Shades of Long Island. So, what is Shades of Long Island? I'm going to tell you. It is a media outlet and a website that highlights minorities, millennials, and Generation Z on Long Island. I started it this year, back in January, and it's been a fun journey. And basically, I highlight lifestyle, entertainment, general news, and Long Island events, politics, people. So if it involves minorities, millennials, or Generation Z on Long Island, I'm there. So why did I start it? You guys remember this tweet or this story at all? So basically, the story was done on the female faces of the MSNBC, and they highlighted them, but they were missing 2 key people. The 2 people I think of when I think of MSNBC female faces, Joanne Reid and Rachel Maddow. And this did not go unnoticed. Soledad O'Brien, 0 women of color in this picture, prominent journalist and Long Island native. Congrats to all, they're great, sharp, and this is well earned, but no people of color. It's 2019, there's no excuses. So people went in on the lack of inclusion. As you can see, Twitter blew up. So basically, this is an uncommon occurrence that happens often. Minorities and basically, when I say like minorities and people that are diverse, I mean like Black people, Latinx, Asian, women of color, definitely, people in the LGBTQ community. We're often left out. So this is one of the reasons why I started my website, because I'm a native Long Islander, and when it comes to media coverage, I really didn't see myself, and when people like myself were covered, it's often negative, just being realistic. So I wanted to create the site to highlight the things that we're doing. And it's been good. Like I said, I've talked to Latinx people, Asian people, people who are disabled. I just want to be able to highlight the different colors, religions, backgrounds that are on Long Island. So bringing it back to why this event. So as Raheem said, we had a conversation, we started talking about how to get people involved. And the groups that I mentioned before, minorities, millennials, and Gen Z, are often left out of the conversation. We're not involved in the political process. And for me, I know I kind of got into politics because my dad would always watch the television. He would always, get on the screen and do all that. And I was like, I guess this is pretty important. And it's true. Politics are in everything that we do. You cannot escape it. So if you're not involved, you have no control, you're going to miss out. So the purpose of this event is to kind of figure out different ideas, how to increase civic engagement, how to encourage voter turnout, and also bring a sense of unity. Especially in this political climate, there's a lot of division, there's a lot going on, and this event is really to bring us together and figure out ways that we can increase participation in politics and better our community. So I'd really like to bridge that gap and try and see us all work together instead of being so divisive. So does anyone have any questions about my website, about what we're trying to accomplish here tonight, anything at all?
I think it's fantastic. I think that's an amazing idea, and I applaud you and your hard work.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Very welcome.
I agree as well, and we need to focus on News 12 because we don't see any representation of any people of color there anymore.
And
Avery is gone.
Don't worry, they screw the white people too, it's okay. I've been fighting for corruption for I can't tell you how long, 8 years.
But I'm saying representation.
No,
Definitely represent, because it should represent the people that they serve.
Right, yeah. And
hard-working, blue collar, and I
And
can't get it.
minorities.
And I can't tell you how hard it is on us as well. It's I'm not
Enough-
taking a drop away from anything,
A
but
lot of blondes there.
I applaud you because I fight with you as well.
thank you. So I'm not trying to shade on News 12 or Newsday. I interned at Newsday. I know people there. My brother works at News 12, but we can do better.
We sure can.
Well, one of the things I noticed about News 12 and Newsday is that they essentially have a monopoly on the news. So in New York City, you have competing news outlets. You have the Times, you have the Wall Street Journal, you have all these different papers. You don't have that here.
We don't.
So that's part of your problem, or part of our problem, I should say, is that they're not going to represent the communities that we serve, that they serve, because who's going to stand up and say anything to them? There's no alternative.
Well, I guess that's why
Just saying. I mean, you can boycott MSNBC and go somewhere else, or Fox News and go somewhere else. You can't boycott News 12 if you want that kind of stuff.
representation.
So we have to,
I agree.
As a young minority, I realized a lot from what the other man was speaking and what you were saying, and I felt guilty that I wasn't paying enough attention. And this little conversation so far, I learned, I'm like, okay, so let me really pay attention,
Thank you so much. Any comments, questions?
I did want to say that News 12 used to have a show called Diverse Long Island.
Yeah, with
Is that
Avery
still
Harper.
on?
Avery's gone now.
Yeah, Avery.
No, I know Avery's
NBC.
gone, but
They don't do it anymore.
Yeah,
well, you could easily demand that. I mean, they're
We should
really,
all demand it. Definitely.
Right.
No,
yeah.
no,
I mean,
it's
they're.
not that.
I think they're hungry for content, honestly.
Mhm.
I
Well,
mean, they
there's
have some
plenty of
very
content
silly
out there.
shows,
They
so
just have
I'm
to
sure
reach
that would be a
out.
positive addition.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you all for your comments. Anyone else?
No, that was it. All right, thank you,
All right.
Maya.
Thank you so much.
So, next, before we go into the actual panel here, I just quickly wanted to say a few things because I'm in a unique position. I started out in this is kind of more for people who hear this, you know, on the podcast later, people, young, when I say young, I'm talking 21 to 40. Young people here, there's the disconnect that I've noticed, the way that I grew up, all right, this is a nonpartisan thing that we're doing here because voter turnout is dangerously low. All right, it's scary low. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, people are not showing up to vote in municipal elections. One of the things that I noticed, and I just wanted to share this with you guys really quickly, I grew up in foster care. I grew up not meeting my mother until I was 13 years old. I took care of myself from the time I was a very, very young boy, and I can tell you, it was an enlightening experience to travel around New York to different places. I went to a school in Albany, New York called the South School for Boys. It was a Christian academy, and there I met some of the greatest teachers that I would ever, and I still haven't met guys, you know, men and women like this to this day. My English teacher, Miss Young, my civics teacher, Mr. Smith, he taught me a lot. And one of the things that he always instilled in me and my twin brother, who's actually running for office in North Carolina for city council, one of the things that he told us was you can't argue if you're not involved. So you can complain all you want, but there's mechanisms for the everyday citizen to get involved. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to get out to the people was that power lies in information. An informed public will not argue about silly things like Democrat, Republican, this, but that. We all want the same things. We want to be able to take care of our families, right? We want to be able to earn an honest living. We don't want to be assailed in the streets for whatever our life choices may be, our sexual orientations may be. So growing up in a state environment, I was probably, people like me are probably the last people to get involved in politics. They never, and I say they, because if anybody's familiar with the 80s, Reaganomics in New York State, they were wholesale snatching children out of homes. I'm one of them, because my father decided to whoop my behind for doing certain things, and they came in. The first time I went to school, and they said, you was looking sad today. What happened with you? I got in trouble and I got a whooping. Really? Well, what did you do? And then, I mean, within 2 days, we're gone. Gone, like poof, and a family broken up. So going through that, one of the things that I've learned is that's a circumstance. That doesn't make you who you are. That's what you've been through. So getting involved politically, you have to have a sense of belonging, I think. And when you have people that feel like they don't belong in the community or they feel like they're outside of the community, I think this is part of the lack of what we see. So for people who've been through what I've been through, we do events like this to urge you guys, listen, study more, get off the television. And one of the things that I always share, and I would really appreciate if you repeat this to as many people as possible. The enemy of civic engagement is entertainment. All right? The enemy of civic engagement is entertainment. Now I'm going to share something with you, and if anybody disagrees at any point I'm about to make, stop me. Entertainment. Enter, we all agree means to go in, correct? Tain. Does anybody know what tain means?
Contain.
Obtain.
No, those are words with tain in it. So tain is a Latin or Greek word that means to take hold of. So enter means to go in, tain means to take hold of, and ment means what? Mental. It means mind. You see it in front of words like mental, mentality. So you have enter, which means to go in, tain, which means to grab or to take hold of, and ment, which means mind. Entertainment is possession. In a religious community, when something gets into you and takes hold of your mind, we say that person's possessed. Something's got a hold of that person. So in the science world, we know entertainment is not our friend. When you want to think clearly, you can't have things in your mind taking hold of your mind. So break that down for everyone who wants to tell you about entertainment. Did you see the latest movie? Did you look at the laws on the books in your county? Do you know about the state constitution? You want to tell me the football score, those are grown men throwing a ball around. Your fire, your water, your school, your school boards, these are all local matters. Right? We all agree on that. No matter our party, no matter what we're running for, those are all local issues. So, and just closing what I wanted to bring to the table was that I appreciate everybody being here. And again, we have to make a nonpartisan community effort to get young people to come out to vote, because this is our future. And if we all look at the future where we're headed, we want to pay attention to BET and MTV and look at the direction that young people are being steered in. I'm scared to become 75. I don't know if these people understand fiscal responsibility. I don't think this is being ingrained, into the community. So, what we're gonna do with the panelists, I want everybody to briefly introduce yourselves. I don't mind if you talk about what you're running for, but and we'll start on the end and work our way down. I want everybody to introduce themselves. A little bit of background, what got you into law, politics, civics, etc. And we'll take the panel discussion from there. So, you first.
Okay, good evening. My name is Annette Totten. I am running for Supreme Court Justice for the 10th Judicial District, which includes Nassau and Suffolk counties. I started practicing law in 2004, and as a result of that, I was able to see firsthand how the system runs. I've been approached by several people asking me to get involved in politics, and finally I gave it a chance. My goal is to see, through diversification, people to be united, and the people to understand that they do count on the local level. When you go out to vote in the local elections, that determines how your town, your county, whatever is ran. It is very important that your voices be heard. You can complain, you can do whatever, but if you're not out there making a difference, but unfortunately, I think our people perish for lack of hope. They don't think their voices will count. Like, oh, this is how the system is running. I'm not going to change it. But one person may not, but if everyone gets together, and you can disagree, you can agree to disagree. But the main thing is everyone be heard, because you can grow with diversity. I don't feel that one group is more correct than the other. I just think people should get together. Like the gentleman said, we have so many issues at hand. Economics, just a lot of different issues I really cannot go into detail about, but I do believe that it's very important at a local level to become involved, as opposed to just complaining and not doing anything about it.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Vidal. I'm running for the 9th District Legislature. That concerns Brentwood, CI, and North Bayshore. I'm not a politician. I'm learning. The reason that made me to run for this position is seeing the situations that my community and the others are going through. I work in non-profit organization. I've been helping, in different difficulties that they have. And that is the reason that I try to run for that district.
I'm Nick Giordano. I'm not running for anything. I'm a political science professor over at Suffolk County Community College. And so I get to speak with young people every day, all day long. I teach several
poor
courses.
thing.
I wouldn't say poor thing. Some days are more challenging than others. But when we're looking at it, I don't think people realize that Long Island is in a crisis. The reality is that we're seeing young people leave Long Island in droves. We're seeing older people leave Long Island in droves because it's unaffordable. You have rent that is essentially larger than mortgages. It's too expensive for people to stay here. Anyone like to drive on the Long Island roadways? No? We're one of the highest, well, we're the 3rd highest tax state. And then if you look at voter turnout at the local elections, so with Suffolk County, any off-year election, it's between 10 to 20% of registered voters that actually turn out to vote. That's registered voters. If we look at all the people above the age of 18 that can vote, that are eligible to vote, you're only seeing about 5% voter turnout here on Long Island. And then we want to complain about our roads being terrible. I mean, they got better roads in Afghanistan sometimes than they do here. The traffic, we want to complain about the high property taxes. And nobody seems to ask, where's all the money going? I mean, if you look at a cell phone bill, you've got 10 taxes. You're paying 2 different 911 taxes. Well, aren't you also paying for 911 and your cell phone and your property taxes? We have sales taxes. When you factor everything in, you're paying about 60 to 70% of income in taxes. You don't realize it because you don't see the gas tax that you're paying every single week. You're not seeing all the added sales tax when you go to a restaurant and eat or fast food place. And it's becoming more and more difficult, more and more challenged, but nobody's getting involved. And that's part of the problem, especially the youth. And they're being shortchanged. I just did a whole thing on education about it. We spend more than almost every other country on education. We spend more than every country on education, but we spend more than almost every country combined. According to the Department of Education, our own Department of Education, according to their study, the National Report Card, which is the largest ongoing assessment of what students know and can do, graduating seniors are only 22% proficient in every subject area. That's the average. 22% proficient in the subject area. That's it. How can we call that success? And so when you look at those numbers, and then you look at what's going on, it kind of makes sense. I get students all the time, they don't know much about American government, they don't know much about politics and civics, and they have it much more difficult than when someone like myself was growing up. When I was growing up, and I'm not that old either, but when I was growing up, you had 13 channels. So at 6 o'clock, you're forced to watch the news. That was on every channel, you're forced to watch the news. If the president came out to speak, you're forced to listen to the president. So we were much more engaged in my generation. Now you have all these distractions. You got 2,000 channels on cable, amazing that nothing's ever on. You have cell phone, you have the internet. I mean, you have so many more distractions for kids today than ever before. And that's part of the reason that they've disengaged from the political process. And so how do we draw people back in? And how do you draw people back in when the political environment is as toxic as it is today? And the reality is that local elections, it's really not that partisan when you're thinking about it. When you're thinking about the local issues, it never used to matter really about Republican or Democrat. Now we're nationalizing local elections and making it just as divisive as the federal elections. But I don't know a single person that wakes up in the morning and says, wow, I can't wait to get on Nichols Road or Long Island Expressway and drive to work. I mean, nobody enjoys that experience. And so when you look at red light cameras, I mean, Long Islanders are mostly in agreement about almost all the issues. And yet we're just not engaged. And the question is, how do we bring people back into the process? And hopefully we can discuss that.
Well, thank you. So you got the questions. I wanna ask first for the people that are watching this. When I tell people about getting civically engaged, and you know, everyone can give an answer to this kind of question. I'll throw it out there. One of the things that I tell people is that politics is a multidisciplinary study. All right. If you say politics and then you only say Donald Trump, or you say politics and you only say the governor, you're not realizing that politics draws on several different sciences. So you have to be engaged in law to understand politics. You have to be engaged in, believe it or not, psychology. You have to understand the human mind. You have to understand history, all right? It's mandatory because I tell people, and again, I'll let you guys speak more to this. I tell people, if you don't understand, there's more than one history. There's general history we're taught, then there's economic history, the development of the currency and how that has grown. There's your political history, okay? Then there's your social history, which we all know, which we're all taught in basic, in school. So politics is drawing upon several different fields of study, and anthropology is included in this. It's a social science, and I'm pretty sure you can, that's about right. I mean,
Completely agree. And it's very complex, and people try and oversimplify it.
And it's not a simple thing. So, and I'll ask you more to the more part of this. What are some of the things that people can do to get more familiar with the laws that govern them? What would you suggest people do? Because I think politics and law they have to go hand in hand. So, as an attorney, what do you think people can do to understand law at a layman level?
Very simple. I always tell people, know your rights. Basic rights. Just know your rights. Be informed. Stop listening to everything you hear. And fear is a paralyzer. A lot of times I feel people are fearful, they want to get involved, or no one's going to listen to me, or if I do find out something, what can I do about it? You have to have knowledge. You cannot do anything without the basic knowledge. One of the things that was good about law school gives you a basis, just so that you have enough information that you'll be able to have a decent conversation with any person regarding any subject matter. And I feel that the general population should do that also. Just learn. You have to educate yourself. Whether you have to go to the library, you gotta be careful Googling. That information is not always accurate. But you have to know, you have to educate yourself. If you don't know anything, how do you protect yourself? How do you know how to go out and vote? What do you vote for? So I recommend knowledge.
Okay, if anybody wants to add on to that, feel free.
And that's exactly what I always tell the community that when I, work around. I told them to teach the little ones that go into school to learn from where they can. Because, like for example, the Hispanic, we have that problem. They said, where are you born? And they said, I'm Salvadorian. And I said, you born in El Salvador, for example. And they said, no, I'm born here. So I said, you're not Salvadorian, you are American. And that's why I make emphasis to the parents to teach their children to know where they born, to start learning their rights and what is this country that they born. They have to learn the history. They have to learn that the rights that they have. And I try to encourage them to do that. So.
And I think learning about your rights is essential in the system, but
Exactly.
sorry to disappoint everyone, it's not really working. And it's not working,
No,
so
it's not.
I give my students, the first day of class, I'll give them a citizenship exam, so this semester,
Fail, super fail.
6 sections, not one of them was able to pass that citizenship exam. I then give them the Russian Constitution. I tell them it's the American Constitution, but it's really the Russian Constitution. Have them read it, then they have to write 2 paragraphs on it, and we discuss it in class. And there was only 3 out of about 170-something students that identified that they weren't reading the United States Constitution.
It's amazing.
It's scary out there.
It's like the schoolhouse romp.
Well, the schools are horrible.
Schoolhouse romp.
It's horrible that they haven't even gone online to research it. And it's something that they should have gotten in the K through 12 system, but something's broken down in the K through 12 system where they're not getting this education. So they don't even know, forget the politics of American government, they don't even know the mechanics of American government, how it's set up, how we have the federal level, we have state level, we have local level, the branches, the checks and balances, the separation of powers. And then they get into my class, and this is college, and I have to teach that now, when I should be teaching more advanced things. So when we talk about learning the rights, I think a lot of these students today and the much younger generations, I think they were shortchanged with their education by not learning it. And when we do teach quote-unquote history, we don't talk about the complexity of our history. Our history is not that simple. Our history is actually very complicated. So one of the things I'll talk about, and they'll be shocked to find out, well, we had an integrated military from the American Revolution all through the Civil War, and then after the Civil War, then we segregated the military. I mean, think about it. During the days of slavery, our military was actually integrated, where blacks and whites were serving side by side. And then after the Civil War, we separated that out, and most people aren't aware of that. When I talk about, Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers, obviously has a history of slavery, everyone knows about Sally Hemings, but none of my students know that in 1807, he was the president that pushed through the bill to ban the importation and exportation of slaves into the United States and out of the United States. So there's a history that we have that people aren't aware of, and a lot of people don't understand or appreciate what makes the United States an exceptional nation. So we look at it as if we can't say the United States is a great country because of our past history. No, what makes us a great country is that we did have slavery. We did have segregation in Japanese internment camps, and women didn't have the right to vote. And guess what? We teach that each and every day in the classrooms. We want to prevent it from ever happening again. That's the history of a great nation. We don't try and sugarcoat our past. We don't try and hide the fact that we had slavery. We admit it. We own up to it. And we're still paying the price today for things like that. And it's about being honest. But if these kids don't even know the simple breakdown of how the government is set up or their fundamental rights, well then how can they have opinions on issues? How can they really engage in the conversation and actually have the dialogue? And that's the biggest problem I see today. And I'm not just slamming kids, because I can guarantee you there's a hell of a lot of adults that won't pass the citizenship exam either. It's not just about the kids.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Nick Giordano.
Nick Giordano, okay, so.
Well, we'll do questions after.
Oh, I thought, okay,
Yeah, we'll
I'm
do
sorry.
questions after.
I thought-
Mariah got some more questions.
Well, I definitely agree with what you guys are saying in terms of not really being taught the law, because I know for my education. I feel like we are taught the separation, checks and balances, we're taught that, but I feel like we're taught the same basic recycled stuff one year after the next, and we don't really go in depth, and we don't get really concrete examples. So I do agree that the law component was definitely missing in the classroom, and then certain classes where you do go in depth with things like the law, they're optional. Like I took like AP classes. Not everyone's taking those classes. I took AP classes. Not everyone's taking that, so they don't have that understanding. So I do agree with that. Going back to my generation, how do you think that you can increase civic engagement and voter turnout among, like, so I'm 23. I'm like the millennial like Generation Z bracket. How would you encourage those 18 and over in that younger bracket to vote? What do you think will draw them to wanting to get engaged in government?
So we'll work our way back this way this time. You go first.
Partly shame, I do believe shaming works. That's one of the points of my little exercise with the citizenship exam and the Russian Constitution exam.
I actually took the citizenship test, I think in high school. I actually did better than I thought I would, but.
Well, I do believe that it should be a requirement to graduate high school. Indiana has actually made that a requirement to get your high school diploma. You do have to pass the citizenship exam, so that's good at least. We should follow their lead. But to get younger people engaged, we need to show them that they actually do matter, and we need to talk about issues to them. But more importantly, and I think this cuts across just the age thing, I think it cuts across race, I think it cuts across religions, is talk to them and ask them, what are their issues that they're concerned about, rather than dictate. Because, you know, it's easy for an adult to dictate to kids, or to dictate to anyone. Rather than dictate, ask them, what are your top concerns? What are your primary concerns? And then try and find the common ground, and that's how you're gonna get them more engaged. So one of the things my students are really concerned about is the cost of college education. And right off the bat, I tell them how smart they are for going to a community college first. Because we're looking now, and hey, for four-year universities, does a cost versus benefit analysis really make sense? Should you go and get $150,000 to become a teacher? And so I think we have to engage, but I also think that we need to show people the complexities of putting in policies. That it's not as simple as what the politicians say. Oh, well, I'm gonna implement this program. You know, I'm gonna do a universal education system, or I'm gonna build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. Life is not that simple. If it was that simple, everything would have been done already, and we'd be living on Easy Street. It's much more complex than that. There's unintended consequences. Partly for the youth, some of the difficulties is that they don't go out and vote. And so if I'm running for office, no offense to younger people, but I'm gonna focus on the people that do go out and vote. I'm gonna focus on the older people. I'm gonna talk about things like Social Security and Medicare and making sure I'm protecting it, because that's what's gonna help me get elected. Not offering all the other programs that are gonna help younger people. And I think that young people need to have buy-in. They need to feel that they have a place in this society. A study came out of Britain, and since we're similar to a certain degree, it was between the ages of 18 to 29. 89% of those between the ages of 18 to 29 felt that they lacked any sense of purpose in life. If you're telling me that that's not a crisis right there, that you don't have any sense of purpose in life, I mean, that's catastrophic.
There's a word for that, it's called nihilism.
Well, I think what happened, and that's where our generations are the ones to blame, is we changed the culture where it's almost as if we started to teach people that the more stuff you have, the more that equals success. And it turns out that now we have more stuff than ever before. Every generation has more stuff than ever before, but it doesn't equate into happiness. And that's part of the problem that we're seeing with the youth today. They feel disaffected, and they have all this stuff. And so they have all this stuff. Why are they sad? Well, because they're not part of anything anymore. We're not community, we're strangers in our community. It's a problem.
Have you considered assigning your students to help a candidate for office?
I do that sometimes if I could get both Republican and Democrat candidates, because I won't only give them one candidate. I make sure that it's nonpartisan in that sense. But yeah, some of them get engaged. I think Tom did an internship years ago. Some of them do get engaged at the local level. Some of them do get engaged at the state level. But it is challenging, and they don't realize that the internships is actually more important than the college degree. The college degree is just a piece of paper. The internships is the connections, the networks that you build, that you could go seek a job afterwards once you have that piece of paper.
So Maria.
Well, I am 100%, I agree with your things. and this is what I'm trying to educate the adult, the parents. You know, I always talk to the parents because if they don't give the example, so that the children will not get the example. And like he said, every day they want more stuff, new stuff, but they don't understand that if they don't learn something different, they will not move ahead. And going to a school, but are not learning the whole purpose of to be a success in the community, and going to civic activities, participating in what is going on in the town, is difficult for them to understand what's, is the next level of living in that community. I try to teach, the youth that go into my place where I work, and telling them that participating with the things in the community help them to open a big window as going to school and reading those big books and getting a knowledge. And like I said before, teaching them, not only the youth but the parents, to learn together, learning the rights, learning the constitution of this country. It will help them to move on in life in different ways.
Okay. I believe in order to get the youth involved, they have to feel good about themselves, that it matters. I think in any endeavor in life, you have to start with the basic foundation. You can talk to them about it, or it'll work, or whatever, but the youth, from what I can see in my practice and just knowing young people in general, they're just very, very, I would have to use the word disgusted. They really don't want to be bothered. They do not want to hear it. They'd rather get high or drive around, entertainment, football. They really don't want to be bothered. And somehow you have to make them feel as if they really do count, that it does matter. You are someone. And that, to me, crosses all racial, economic, all boundaries. You have to feel that you matter. I mean, what can you do in life in general, not just with politics? A job, if you go for a job interview, but you don't really feel good inside about it, you're not going to do well. You're not going to even care. So I think it's much deeper than just getting them interested. I think we have a much deeper problem in this generation than just getting them interested. It's way deeper than that. I don't think they have respect for people. I don't think they trust anything. And unfortunately, I would have to say that goes because of all the things they've observed. They just feel like, oh man, that's just, everything's BS. And until we can change, and I think change only goes by example. When we get one person in there that, wow, that person is true. They are doing what they said. They're going to make a difference. They're going to help us. But until we change that, I don't really think the young people are going to really care. I hate to say that.
Well, that is part of the situation too. And when I receive young people on my job for interview, I look at them. I have to return like a dozen sometimes of people going because the way they dress for an interview. I receive some of them in PJ, and I said, "Excuse me, who are you?" And I said, "You coming for an interview?" So I don't embarrass them, but I sit them down and I explain. And I said, "You can do this and how to do it, and then you come back and we will have the interview." But the way they go and present themselves is very hard. It's painful. And they don't want to let the earphone here to the phone. They are connected all the time with the phone. And that's another problem that we see now. They cannot let go the cell phone any moment. And I said, when you go to an interview, it's very important that you present respect. Let go the phone for a minute.
The second you take that phone out, you're not getting the job.
Exactly. Let go that phone because I'm trying to talk and have a conversation with you. But that way, we cannot work. So I have to tell them, when you're ready, come back. And that's, I feel like I'm teaching a little bit that they have to change entitled to get something. Because I don't know how, or maybe, I don't know if in the school teaching that when they go to interviews, they have to dress.
I don't know if the schools
Schools aren't teaching much.
That's not taught in schools.
No.
And I know that with that, with those points, I do agree that we are distracted by our phones. Mine's right here. But you can also trace that to the parents as well, because where are they getting that education from? You know what I'm saying? So it's not taught in schools. That's not taught. And if the parents are doing it, then who's doing it? And so, and back to your point of saying that we've seen the BS. I think after years of observing the BS and the corruption in politics and things like that, we're kind of just like, I don't want to be a part of this, because we've seen all this corruption going on. And I think, you know, from my point of view, it's kind of just like, oh man, we often say, you know, millennials, we often say, oh, we gotta fix this, we gotta do this, we gotta do that, because we see what's going on, and it's just like, we don't want to get involved in the same mess that we're seeing, you know what I mean? So I definitely agree that mentors need to be in place. If the parents aren't stepping up and doing that, like with the interview, like you're saying, that's important. How you look and how you present yourself is definitely, and then a lot of kids, you know, my age aren't taught that.